the Education and Youth Matters Committee to order. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Cone.
Present.
Alderwoman Ingracia.
Present.
Alderman Gunther.
Here.
Alderwoman Rice.
Here.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Navarro.
Here.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Correct.
Chairwoman Spencer.
Present.
Alderwoman Martin. You have 8 present.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, and I'd like to excuse Alderwoman Martin as an excused absence for tonight. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for being present for the city's new committee, the Education and Youth Matters Committee, and this is our first hearing ever. I'd like to give a special shout out to the alderman from the 25th for helping to develop this new committee so that the city of St. Louis can finally comprehensively review policies as it relates to our city's youth and as it relates to education concerns. We have a lot of shifts in education and we certainly have some very serious issues to tackle here. I'd also like to recognize the alderwoman from the 26th ward for suggesting that we have our first hearing be a public input hearing, which was the inspiration for holding tonight's hearing. And I think we've all agreed as members of this committee that it's important to hear from the general public and hear the concerns that we should be hearing for us to develop our focus as a newly formed committee for the city of St. Louis. So thank you both for that. And thank you all for spending your Monday evening here with us as we enter our holiday week here. If you haven't already signed up to speak, we have a sign-in sheet as well as an agenda over here on the table, and we'll be taking the sign-in sheet so that we can hear from you all in an orderly manner. And that's over there to the right. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my committee members to speak briefly about what it is that the committee would like to hear, and then we'll turn it over to everybody in the audience to also bring forth issues that you'd like this committee to consider. And with that, I'll start with the Vice Chairman, Alderman from the 25th.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I want to reiterate my appreciation to everyone that's here tonight. This committee has been many years in the making. When I first got down to the Board of Aldermen, I really wanted to focus as much energy on youth development in our city. And one of the things that I had learned over time being a member of the Board of Aldermen is that we really didn't have an opportunity as a board to engage the general public and also institutions and organizations that support youth in our community to have critical conversations around, youth, their development, their education, recreation opportunities, even things like pre-K care, before and after school programming. So it became an opportunity, I think, for us to create a space for those conversations to take place, and also hopefully provide a collaborative voice for the different organizations, institutions, and people that are doing the work to support our young people in this city. So I look forward to being on this committee. I look forward to working with all of you that are here tonight. In some cases, continuing the work that we've been working on for many years now. But again, want to reiterate my appreciation for your time this evening as well.
Alderwoman Ingracia.
I don't have anything. Looking forward to hearing from everybody tonight.
Alderman Gunther.
Just the same. Thank you everyone for being able to show up tonight and give us kind of a little bit of input in the different fields that you all respectively work in. Noticing that we have some representatives from Roosevelt High School here, which is wonderful, Thomas Dunn Learning Center, which are two the schools and learning centers that greatly affect my ward. So thank you very much for being here. And some of the newly elected school board members, glad to have you here. And as we work on figuring out how the elected school board will be transitioning and taking over, that's what we're here for. So thank you very much for your input tonight.
Alderwoman Rice.
Thank you. Just echoing again, thanks everyone for being here. We're all looking forward to finding ways to connect City Hall to our schools, to our kids, making those connections, tying all of these pieces together. We know that there are a lot of really great things happening in the city, and then there are challenges that we have. And so the more we can get everybody in the same room to discuss what's going on and really see where our strengths are and then where the gaps are, hopefully we can help facilitate that process. So I don't think anybody thinks that we're going to take over and control anything from here, but we want to help facilitate the best communication possible for the best services for our kids and our present and our future. So thank you again, everyone, for being here, and thank you to Alderman Cohn for kicking this off and making this happen. Thanks.
Alderwoman Navarro.
Thank you. I'm also looking forward to hearing from everyone in the room. I will just mention, personally, one of the things that I hope that we can address as a committee is one of what I think is the biggest challenge that's going to be affecting our youth in the future, and that's the effects of the climate crisis. And while we need to be doing everything we can to mitigate that, what are we doing to prepare them to be leaders in this literally new environment? So, but again, I look forward to hearing from all of you tonight, so thank you.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing from everyone here tonight and pretty much learning from everyone here. That's pretty much it.
And Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Good evening. Like everyone of my colleagues said, thank you all for taking the time out on a Monday evening to come out and hear from us as much as we want to hear from you all. Thank you again, Shane. I know that there were ideas of having committees like this before, but at my first caucus meeting, for you to stand up and get it done, I was excited about that because Education and Youth Matters is one of the bigger issues to me, being a mother of 5 in the city, of St. Louis Public School parent. And on a day like today, when they officially take back full governance, it's just important, and I think it's good that we are here together tonight and ready to work collaboratively to service our youth in the city. So thank you again for all of you. I'll be here. I look forward to hearing from you and to hearing how we all as a committee can help you all. Thank you.
And with that, I will introduce the committee again. Just to read our mission as a committee, the Education and Youth Matters Committee will consider matters pertaining to education and youth development. This includes youth and adult education and youth development matters in both the public and private sectors. And I've been instructed by our clerk that for public hearing procedures, I am to read the first 2 paragraphs of our, as a part of our rules for the Board of Aldermen, so I'm going to go ahead and get that out of the way. We're not presenting a bill tonight, so this may seem a little bit out of context, but I'll go ahead and read these rules regardless. After the presentation of a bill at any public hearing, the proponents and opponents shall be heard alternately. All persons who wish to testify at a public hearing shall sign a list, which shall be made available by the chairman of the committee at least 1/2 an hour before the announced time of the hearing. Thank you, Mr. Clerk, for providing such a list. The initial presentation of any witness shall be no longer than 5 minutes, except with the permission of the committee chairman. So if any of you would like to speak longer than 5 minutes, please give a heads up, and please be aware that we do all want to go home at some point tonight to our families or our dogs or whoever might be waiting for us. But any witness may respond to questions by members of the committee for an additional period of time to be determined by the committee chairman, and any witness may submit written testimony to the committee at any time prior to the conclusion of the hearing of the bill. We'll also be taking public comment for the next few weeks as we compile what is of interest. I know a lot of folks were on vacation this week, so if you don't get to say everything you want to say tonight, please feel free to submit them to me or any member of the committee, and we will share them amongst ourselves as we kind of develop the priorities going into this session. And with that, I'll bring up the first speaker. If there's anybody who hasn't signed up who would like to, please just indicate yourself to the clerk and we will make sure that we get you on the list. And first on the list tonight, we have Cece Tompkins. Is Cece in the room? And if you don't mind, for the folks at home, all of our hearings are being taped by STL TV. So if you don't mind identifying yourself clearly into the microphone, that way.
Sure. Can you hear me okay from here?
Yep, just go ahead and state your name and the organization you're representing.
So
the record.
CC Tompkins with the Children's Education Alliance of Missouri. So I am the Community Outreach Manager for the Children's Education Alliance of Missouri. We are a K-12 parent advocacy organization that believes that all children deserve access to a quality education no matter where they live and no matter how much their family makes. In my role, I help parents find the best fit school for their kids. I speak with them over the phone and in person to make school recommendations for traditional public schools, magnet schools, charter public schools, private schools, VIC transfers to the county, and now virtual education. I provide parents with the information about schools, including data on quality from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and firsthand knowledge about individual schools, cultures, and educational focuses. We want to make sure that families are aware of all their options because at SEAM, we believe that all children learn in different ways, and parents should have a variety of options to choose from to find the best fit for their child. I applaud St. Louis for being one of the 2 cities in Missouri that provides parents multiple options. My hope for St. Louis is that we can start to shift our conversation happening around our school landscape. We should embrace the pluralism we have, as well as start to view education in terms of which schools are doing well regardless of the type of school they are. We should be supporting and learning from schools that are getting the job done. We should be duplicating quality programs and sharing best practices. Schools should also consider sharing resources to create more opportunities for more children. This is already happening in the Shaw neighborhood with the Greenhouse Venture, which is a shared STEM space for 4 schools, 2 private schools, St. Margaret of Scotland and Tower Grove Christian, Melanthi Magnet School, and St. Louis Language Immersion School, a charter public school. These are the kinds of partnerships that we need more of in St. Louis. We should be asking what is best for our children, not what is best for our education system. So my ask of you today is that you use this philosophy as your guiding principle when considering education in St. Louis. Look for more partnership opportunities. Stop engaging in a false us versus them debate between traditional public schools and public charter schools. Highlight, celebrate, and encourage the schools that are excelling, and don't be afraid to call out and question those that are not. Ask yourselves this: if you started from scratch today with no schools, no districts, no centuries of institutional traditions, what kind of education system would you create using all of the technology, freedom, and resources we have in the 21st century? Let's make that a reality in St. Louis. Thank you for your time.
Does anybody have it? Thank you, CC Tompkins. I'll go ahead and ask, does anybody in the committee have any questions? Sure.
Yeah, so can you just explain a little bit more in depth what your organization does in the St. Louis City area?
Sure. So it's kind of a twofold thing. So in my role, I advise parents on school options and let them know all of their options that are available to them. But we're also a policy organization. So we work on K-12 education policy to create more opportunities for parents to have more options. And we're a statewide organization. So we're not just in St. Louis. We work with families in Kansas City, Springfield, Columbia, everywhere. Although I'm not able to advise on schools necessarily outside of St. Louis, so that part of our focus is just St. Louis specific.
And so are you a 501c3 organization?
Yes, we're a C3, so we just do advocacy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so does your organization primarily work with the charter schools, or do you work with public schools or parochial schools? Or
We work with all schools.
Okay.
I know that since we do a lot of work with charter schools, that SLPS sees it, I think, as somewhat of a conflict to work directly with us, but I mean, we embrace all kinds of schools.
Okay.
So.
That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Can you tell us where you get your funding from?
We're privately funded, and we do a lot of fundraising throughout the year. So, yeah.
Thank you for being here tonight.
All right, thank you for your time.
Next up, we have Will Suggs, who is here representing the Self.
So my name is Will Suggs. For those of you who haven't met me, like I said,
You
when
can
I signed
adjust
up,
the microphone if it's more comfortable for you.
how's
There you
that?
go.
Feel much better. So I'm here today on behalf of my 2 kids. I'm a city parent. I have 2 kids who can't quite speak yet, so I'm here to advocate on their behalf. I grew up in the city of St. Louis. I've moved back. I didn't go to city public schools, but I love the city, and I hope to stay in the city and send my kids to city public schools. So when they're old enough to go to those schools, I want that to be an option for them. So I just want to offer kind of my thoughts on what I'm considering in the schools in my neighborhood and the options available to us. And I kind of wanted to start with just an anecdote that I have from when we first moved into our neighborhood. We live in Fox Park, and my wife, myself, and my daughter, this is before my son was born, attended a neighborhood event where SLPS, charter schools, a number of different community organizations all showed up to advocate for themselves in the park. People could get an idea of what they're doing, so we went to SLPS because we wanted to see what they had to offer. We don't know anything about our neighborhood schools. And the first thing we were directed to were the magnet schools. Whoever was there representing SLPS looked at us and decided that we would be best suited for magnets, even though my daughter at the time was about 1 year old, so I don't really know where they got the impression that we would be that advanced. But I found it somewhat disturbing that the neighborhood schools down the streets weren't brought up first. I see neighborhood schools as potential anchors for neighborhoods, for communities, and the school district itself should be advocating for those first. When I brought up both Siegel and Shenandoah Elementary as alternatives to magnets, they had a representative there who told us that if we chose to send our daughter to pre-K there, that she assured us that she would be kept separate from the general population of students, as if that would be a concern of mine, which it isn't. So that was not a great start for me. I'm still committed to these neighborhood schools. I'd really like to send my kids there, but even looking into them more, I found some more issues that could potentially come up. So I'm trying to do some advocacy on the front end of things. The first thing I saw were test scores, which I know can go any which way. It all depends on where the kids are coming from and the resources available to them. But the other thing that really struck me was both Siegel and Shenandoah over 90% black, despite being in neighborhoods which are racially diverse. And particularly, I was able to look into this into Shenandoah because of the neighborhoods that it covers. Shenandoah covers all of Talgrove East, Compton Heights, Talgrove Heights, and Shaw, which are racially diverse, if not leaning white. And that school is still over 90% black. So what that says to me is that white families in those areas are sending their kids elsewhere. They're not choosing the neighborhood public school, and they're doing that because we've leaned on this policy of school choice. We're allowing them to take their kids and send them somewhere other than their black neighbors. And what we're doing by allowing them that choice is we're perpetuating segregation in those schools. So I would like to send my kids to those schools. I would like for those to be diverse schools, and I would like to see our city not perpetuating that de facto segregation through school choice. And that's something I think this committee can do something about. I know you're limited because the state has a lot more power over these matters than you do, but I would like to work with you all to see the best way to get that done. The other piece of this that I've been looking at more than anything else, because it's a much bigger topic, is looking at the revenue that's been diverted away from city public schools. And I know there's another committee that deals with a lot of revenue issues that this committee may not be able to cover a lot of it, but the primary things that I've been looking at are through the money diverted through tax increment financing, through tax abatements, which has largely become the status quo for any new development in the city of St. Louis, vouchers to private and religious schools, and charter schools, which I know there's plenty of advocates for those here today, but ultimately The vast majority end up performing the same, if not slightly worse, than public schools. I won't get into that debate, but what I would like to really focus on is the amount of money that these schools are missing out on. Our schools are under-resourced. Our teachers are paid extremely poorly. We're at very low. We're not at the worst state in the country in terms of how we compensate our teachers, but we can be doing much better. There's at least one presidential candidate who's advocated for a $60,000 minimum starting salary for public school teachers. I think that would be great. That may not be attainable considering we're at something around like 34 right now in the city of St. Louis. But that's what we should be going for, and we should be going for neighborhood public schools that provide wraparound services that can be anchors and institutions in our neighborhoods. And we're not going to do that by allowing people to send their kids off across the city and drain those schools of both racial diversity and academic achievement by sending the highest achievers to magnet schools. These can be real anchors for our neighborhoods, but we're just not allowing them to do that through our policy of school choice. So just to kind of summarize, and there's one other small piece that's completely related to these, a little less controversial, is that in order for my kids to get to Siegel, which is actually my neighborhood school, they have to cross over Jefferson Avenue at Russell. Jefferson Avenue at Russell is an extremely dangerous intersection. I think just the fact that it's a couple blocks from 44, I mean, I'm a large person, I expect to have large kids, but they're still small and they're much more vulnerable to that. Drivers in St. Louis can be extremely aggressive. I feel like a lot of basic traffic laws aren't even being enforced in the city. And it's scary. It's scary for me to walk around the streets, just not even having to cross the street, and to send my kids across that street every day for the entire school year. It's not something I want to do, and maybe I'll be able to send them to Shenandoah instead, but that's outside of my neighborhood. I have to figure out that process. So that's just another piece. And just to kind of go back and summarize, I'd like to see money quit being diverted from our public schools. I'd like to see an end to the de facto segregation of our neighborhood schools. And I'd like to see the goal for this committee to be above the bare minimum of having competent schools, but being able to provide more for our neighborhoods and make them anchors and institutions within our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Suggs, for being here, especially as a parent spending your Monday evening with us to talk about this. With that, I'll take any questions from any committee members. Sure.
I'm curious about your thoughts, if you could expand a little bit more on magnet schools. I guess most magnet schools are not for high achievers. There's just 3 in my mind, unless you know differently. And I think sometimes magnet schools are designed to be niche schools to fit sort of the characteristics of certain kids who want to learn a certain type of way that's outside of the traditional Academy of Basic Instruction. So are you not supportive of magnet schools in general, or just the ones that you have to test into?
Well, I don't see magnet schools as the biggest problem that SLPS is facing, honestly, but I do see them as a means for parents who can put in the time and the effort to get their kids into a different institution and pull them out of a classroom with kids who could benefit from their presence there. I don't know much about the other magnet schools that are not high-achieving schools, honestly. I'm still looking into it. I don't know much about it.
Okay. Yeah, well, and I think we've spoken about this before. Candidly, my kids are at a magnet school, and I wrestle with that almost every day because I would have loved to have sent my kids to Hodgin Elementary, but they would have been, in a much different situation than they would be at any other school. And so I'd be happy to work with you on this issue. I think that there needs to be some interaction with the school district, but also with members of the community to get people ready to send their kids to a school. I mean, we can be Pollyanna-ish, but there are definitely in some of the neighborhood schools, not just school choice for white families who are wanting to send their kids other places, but there are people of color who send their kids all over. Shenandoah Elementary does not have, over half of the kids there don't come from the neighborhood. And so I think if we want to have real neighborhood institutions, we need to have both people of color and white folks sending their kids to neighborhood schools. So I'd be happy to work with you on that, and thank you so much for being an involved constituent. It's appreciated.
Thank you. And I mean, that's the dilemma that we all face ultimately as parents is we want to do what's best for our kids. So, you know, it's going to be tempting when they're school age to want to send my kids to the best possible school and get them the best possible outcome because that's what matters to me. But hopefully they can have similar outcomes in my neighborhood school and we can make that a quality option for them.
I had a quick question, just as a background, and I can appreciate your passion for wanting your children to go to school in their neighborhoods and in St. Louis Public Schools, as a matter of fact, because I share that same passion with you. That's why my children are in St. Louis Public Schools. But I just was curious, since you mentioned it, that you didn't go to public schools. What school system or what school district were you in?
I went to SLU High. My parents sent me to Catholic school all the way through college. I was fortunate in a sense, but at the same time, I struggle with them because I'm not Catholic myself. But I mean, I live with that, and I'm trying to do something different with my kids because I have different values than my parents.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Thank you again for coming up here. You brought up some really important issues, I think, issues that have been resonating with us, members of this committee offline, and thank you for bringing them to us here tonight.
Thank you.
And next on the list, we have Ms. Natalie Vowell, representing the Board of Education, the newly instated elected Board of Education. Thank you for being here tonight, Natalie.
Just a clarification, I'm not officially representing the board. I'm here as a citizen, but I am a member of the board.
Oh, sorry, it says here. Okay.
Sorry, it was too much to clarify.
Yep.
So, as you mentioned, as of today, we are the governing body of St. Louis Public Schools, and thank you all for starting this committee. I think it's fitting that you're meeting today. I just wanted to welcome a collaborative relationship and welcome all of you, encourage you to attend our meetings to see what we're working on, make sure we're not duplicating efforts. But most importantly, I think that we need to look at ways that socioeconomic and environmental factors are impacting student performance, and those are things that the school district can't necessarily handle, but the Board of Aldermen may be able to help lift some of those barriers. So looking at ways that we can work together as the Board of Education and with this committee. And lastly, as a resident of Mark Twain, I have 2 fellow Northsiders on this committee, and I would like to encourage all of you to reach out to the community and find out what they need before deciding what is best for them. So I think a collaborative approach with not just the school board, but the community itself, beyond public hearings, if that's possible, is a good way to approach things. So thank you very much, and that's all I have to say.
Does anybody on the committee have any questions for Ms. Vowell?
I do. So thank you again for being here, especially on a night that's as auspicious as tonight. You mentioned a few areas where we might be able to collaborate as a Board of Aldermen and also, you know, as a school district. Can you elaborate a little bit further on those and just your experience and thoughts with regard to those things specifically and where we might be able to open up some conversations around that?
So I think for me personally, I look at kids in my neighborhood who have housing insecurity, who have food insecurity, and those are things that the school system tries our best to address, and it's not always possible. We don't always have the funding or the capacity. So there are ways, hopefully, that you guys can work on that. Just picking up the slack, I guess, for lack of a better term, of where the schools have to draw the lines where we don't have the resources. So obviously welcome any of you guys' ideas.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Just had a quick comment. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited that the elected school board is back, and please keep me posted on how I can be helpful. Looking forward to working with you all to make sure that we can address some issues that have been, I think, lying dormant for quite a while that are critically important to the success of a lot of the kids in our community.
Lastly, our first meeting is July 9th at 6:30, St. Louis Public School District headquarters, 801 North 11th Street. So we hope you will join us for that. It should be a historic occasion.
Ms. Vowell, you mentioned encouraging members of the board and specifically this committee to attend some of the Board of Election meetings.
Board of Education.
I'm sorry. We don't normally get notifications of those meetings. Perhaps that's something we could initiate together.
Sure.
Especially if there's something on an agenda that would be of a special interest to, or something that the Board of Aldermen could address, we could initiate a way to kind of make sure that at least this committee is aware of some of those more important
Sure,
needs.
and I would be glad to get your contact information and send something to all of you. As a secretary of board, the past couple of years, I have always made sure, we had our meetings at different locations throughout the city, so I've always made sure to invite the alder people and committee people from those areas. So now that we're going to be meeting in a centralized location, perhaps it will be easier for everybody to join us.
Thank you. Thank
Anything
you
else?
again for being here tonight.
Can you just reiterate the meeting next week, July 9th?
Yes, July 9th, 6:30 PM at St. Louis Public Schools District Headquarters, which is at 801 North 11th Street. And of course, anyone in the audience is welcome to attend too. Anything else?
Thank you, Natalie.
And next, we have Miss Dorothy Rhodey Collins from the Board of Education.
Hi, my name is Dorothy Rhodey Collins. I'm a resident of the 8th Ward in the Shaw neighborhood, and I'm the president of the Board of Education. I'm really excited that this committee has been formed. I think it presents an excellent opportunity for all the city residents, educational institutions, and community leaders to come together collaboratively and work to achieve positive outcomes for all of the students in our city. And children, even those that are not students. So I ask that you would see the Board of Education as an ally and as a resource as you begin your work and as you continue to work through to achieve those goals. We all would look forward to working with you as you do that, and we're looking to achieve equitable outcomes for all of our students.
And with that, I'll take questions from members of the committee. Alderwoman Rice.
Thanks. I just want to say, as alder person who represents you as a constituent, thank you so much for being here. It was the idea of, I believe, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard and Alderwoman Gracia or Alderwoman Spencer, I'm sorry, to have this meeting tonight, especially to mark the transition over to elected control. So congratulations to all of you that are here, that are a part of the board, and we look forward to strengthening this relationship. So thanks for coming tonight.
Great, thank you.
I'll go ahead and interject here. For anybody who doesn't have at least my contact information, I'll go ahead and put my cards on the table. And if anybody would like to follow up with members of the committee to share with me your contact information, and that way there can be some follow-up, I'll just mention that now before we proceed so that we can continue to have dialogue. Anybody else have any questions for Ms. Rhodey Collins?
I have a quick question. Yes. Do you know if your meetings will be live streamed now?
That is something that we're in discussion about. The one on the 9th would not be, no.
Okay. Myself and Heather won't be able to be at that meeting as much as I would love to be at that meeting, because I'm echoing the sentiments of my colleagues. I'm just excited and elated that you all are taking full governance today. So maybe, I'm sure someone, not just representing the committee, will be there, and we can just have notes and report it back from the first meeting to the committee, because it's going to be important and monumental, and just know that we're rooting for you. We're rooting for you. Thank you.
I did as well. Thank you.
Next, we have Ms. Paula Gardner from Thomas Dunn Learning Center.
I want to start by thanking you guys for developing this committee. It's awesome, it's time, and hats off to all of you for serving on this committee. I'm here, my name's Paula Gertner, and I'm representing Thomas Dunn Learning Center, the adults and the youth that we serve there. You guys know the statistics of Dutchtown, you know the statistics of the youth there. 40% of our population is under 22. 5.5 years ago, I knocked on a lot of doors and did some surveys of the folks in the neighborhood, and the number one ask was to have a GED program or a HiSET program. And so we've established that. We started with the school district. We then moved to our own program. We've typically got 20 some odd adults in the program at all times. We've had 2 cap and gown ceremonies now of graduates. And one of my biggest concerns with the education of the youth is this past winter we had 5 students under 20 years old in our HiSET program that have dropped out of high school, not necessarily because one was kicked out, but the others were fearful of their lives. They wanted to get on with their lives. They just needed their high school education, and it's a concern, and it's a talking point that needs to be had on the kids that want to drop out of school and move on with their lives. The HiSET program is just one of the programs, the adult programs we have. We serve over 8,000 people a year now, but I want to talk a little bit more about the youth that we've served. So we're in our 6th summer of serving youth. Again, we started that way in 1930, and we've come back to it. We see a little over 1,000 youth come through our doors every year, and in the past couple of years anyway. Last year, we had 163 individual youths using our computer lab. 14 of them were members of our Southside Youth Council that meet every Monday. If you guys ever want a youth voice, you're welcome to bring them here or come to them every Monday afternoon if you want to hear a youth voice. They've done a lot of field trips learning about their region and doing some little fundraisers in the neighborhood and just a variety of things. They've really developed their voice, so they'll tell you what they think. We typically employ about 5 youth, usually through Southside or the St. Louis Youth Jobs or other places, and we organically mentor a lot of youth through the center. So that led us to knowing that we needed to have a drop-in center because we have kids that are out of school, they have nowhere to go, they come in and they sleep in our center, we feed them until they can go back to school because they've been kicked out for whatever reason. And so finally this year we've been able to partner with the St. Louis Recreation Division, and a couple of weeks ago we opened what we call The Place in Marquette Rec Center next door. It's only been open for 2 weeks now, but we've enrolled quite a few kids, and we actually saw our first girls last week, which has been hard because we typically see a lot of boys in the center. And so I want to tell you that the place is there to do whatever we need to do, whatever you guys need to do on the south side. We are open to work with you and do whatever needs to happen in Dutchtown. I've been reading a lot about Cure Violence lately. I remember when it was called Ceasefire quite a while ago, and I know the pros and cons of that, and I want to tell you that Thomas Dunn Learning Center supports Cure Violence and the curriculum there and the efforts, but I also want to take this opportunity to give a warning in the way we sometimes do things here in the city. Approximately 8 years ago, I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Laverne Carter on a research project that the city hired her for. She was from St. Louis. She's now in DC. She runs a research firm. And I had the pleasure of working with her to research all the stakeholders across the city on health-related issues. And after a year's worth of work, one of the #1 health indicators was gun violence. And the city rejected the survey, or the research, and didn't adopt it because they didn't feel that gun violence was a health issue. 8 years later, we know that gun violence is a health issue, and when I can walk into my office and look down at my desk and find a spent bullet there that I picked up on my shoe, and it just came in with me off the parking lot, we know that something's wrong there. If we're going to spend $500,000 on Cure Violence, I want to make sure that it's not just in North City. I love North City. That's where I worked for many years before I came down to South City, but I want to make sure that it's spread out among the North City and South City, because I just read Marcus McAllister's words it was in the American last week, and he said that it could be a mirage. I could be here another 7 years. And if we don't serve the entire city with that $500,000, then his words will come true, because it will be a mirage if we just select different parts of the city of our choosing. So on that note, I trust this committee, and I know you guys, and I trust many of you, and I trust you to do the right thing and anything that we can do at Thomas Dunn Learning Center, we're there for you and support you. Questions?
Thank you, Paula, for serving the youth in our city. As you mentioned, we have so many in Dutchtown.
Yes.
We have the highest concentration, in fact, in Dutchtown in the entire St. Louis region. So we thank you for serving our kids. Does anybody on the committee have any questions for Paula?
I do. Oh, go ahead.
I'll start with.
Go ahead.
Seniority has its privileges
I
some
know,
days.
Shane.
Thank you, Paula, for being here. I'm actually, on a personal note, quite happy that 3 of the aldermen that represent Dutchtown are also members of this committee, because Dutchtown has, one of the largest concentrations of youth, not only in the city but in the entire region. As you know, Dutchtown is one of the most densely populated areas in the St. Louis metropolitan region, has one of the most diverse and inclusive areas in the region, and has the largest concentration of families. So I try to remind people on the regular that even though people talk about families leaving the city, they certainly haven't been leaving Dutchtown. And so, for my ward specifically, that's a bit of a frustration point as well, because we haven't had a school presence in the 25th ward at all, and so to have roughly 30% of my population underneath the age of 18 and to not have one school, located within my ward. Now I admit I have several around the periphery of my ward, but to have that many young people in that community and not have a single school in that area is very frustrating. I've worked very hard at trying to get recreation programs up and running, and as you know, Jean Slade Boys and Girls Club is now opening up a facility on a second location in the Dutchtown area, which is very exciting. But I want to publicly commend you for all of the work that you've done in Dutchtown, Gravois Park, Marine Villa, and Mount Pleasant. And just in the last years that you've been executive director at Thomas Dunn, it has definitely become more of a anchor institution within our communities, and getting back to the roots of the organization and servicing the young people in our community. Because for a while there, when I first got elected, they were very much focused on senior programs, which are needed, certainly, in our city, and very much welcomed. But we have obviously a huge need for youth in our communities and making sure that they have programs and opportunities to be successful. So thank you for all of your work.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't have any questions.
Other members of the committee? Alderman Gracia?
Hi, Paula.
Hi, Christy.
Thanks so much for being down here. And do you happen to have a copy of the research that you mentioned before that you said the city rejected with respect to the public health?
I can get it for you.
Okay.
It was done, Dr. Laverne Carter Reese is the name of the organization. She's in Washington, D.C., and it was approximately 8 years ago.
Paula, if you could share that with me, I'd be happy. We could share that with the whole committee.
Thank you, and thank you for the work you do. I wish Thomas Dunn were in the 6th Ward.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Okay. Nice to meet you. My name is Shameen Clark Hubbard again. I represent some of the north side. So I know we're all partial and kind of biased to our neighborhoods and our communities, but I will be honest, in dealing with the meetings around Cure Violence, I have heard about you all's concentrated violence concerns around youth in Dutchtown, and thank you all for introducing me and making sure I was aware of that, because for me, equitable distribution of services across the city, not one side or the other, is important. So with respect to that, I just had a couple of questions about the place, because I don't know if you know that my colleagues and I have a bill before us, Board Bill 81, that's going to be a revised curfew law for youth in the city of St. Louis. And in speaking with some of the officers about the curfew laws and about the curfew bill and their concerns, they kept bringing up the idea of the curfew centers that the city used to have. So with that, the place sounds similar to what they used to take the youth to when they would pick them up off the streets outside of curfew. They would take them to these curfew centers this bill kind of puts them in a more aggressive side of that, which is the concern. What are the hours of the place? And also, how can you help some of us, starting with myself, because I was just at Wold Community Center, which is in the 26th Ward on Saturday, and some of the employees spoke to me about just what you're doing, a drop-in center for a lot of the youth that they see on the streets and the hours that they're not open. Can you just speak briefly on the hours and how somebody else can duplicate that in their centers in their ward?
Sure. Right now, since we just started 2 weeks ago, we're open 3 days a week from 3 until 6, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. By the time school is back in session, we hope to be open from 3 until 7, 4 days a week. It would be awesome if we could grow to that point where we were open as a curfew drop-in, but we would have to work with the city on that. And I would, in the future, I would speak to Mr. Bill Bixson, who's in the room tonight. I'm sorry to call you out on that, but about the other recreation centers and maybe making that happen. I think that would be a fabulous idea.
And just as a point of clarity, that $500,000 for the Cure Violence is only one center. So I wish that would fund more where we could go from from one side to the north side to the south side and in between. But the reality is they reported to us that $500,000 would only have one center. So hopefully, like you said, it won't be a mirage and it'll go to the right communities first. And in the meantime, other community organizations that have been doing the work here faithfully will be still standing in the gap. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. And next we have Nora Ryan from Roosevelt.
You know, I'm with the Roosevelt Community Council. My name is Nora Ryan. I'm a volunteer. We're all volunteers with the Community Council. I actually brought written comments. I'll hold on to one for the time being, in case I forget what I was going to say. But I'm not going to read this, but I do have a little bit of background about the Community Council, some thoughts on things that we've learned through organizing the community, and then starting at the bottom of page 2, some ideas on what aldermen can do.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot this committee can do, and I think it's great that you're doing this. One of the things that I did want to point out is that aldermen have a lot of moral authority, so to speak, and if we're holding a fundraiser and you guys tweet about it and come to it, it helps us. If we're having a meeting and you tweet about it and you let people know, that helps us. If there's not a community organization supporting a particular school, I think that, and it's in your ward, I think that you all could pull together some committed citizens to organize and support that school. And if you attend those meetings, that would be even better, because people want to hang out with you guys. So, seriously, they do.
That's debatable, but
so
depends on which one, Nora.
Huh?
Depends on which one of us.
Okay, so anyway, as you know, I know most of you, I'm actually an attorney, so I can't help but churn out paper, so that's why you're getting written comments, and that's all I had to say other than what's in the document. Questions?
Take members' questions from the committee.
Thanks for being here. I don't have a question for you, but just wanted to thank you for your long-standing commitment to doing really exceptional work at Roosevelt High School for those kids, and it's been an honor to work alongside you, and appreciate the comments, because this is a new committee, and I think we have sort of a mission statement, but outside that, it's good to get advice from the public on how we can move forward, so thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you for your, for those of you who don't know, going above and beyond with all kinds of fundraisers and working to make sure that the Roosevelt kids have access to after-school programs and all kinds of things. Thank you so much for what you do. Yep.
Thank you. Listen, before I step down, point 5 under things you guys could do is to ask someone from the Ferguson Commission to come and speak. I've had this idea kind of floating around in my brain that it would be really a neat thing to have presentations at high schools that would involve parents and kids, and now that you have this committee, it could involve the Board of Aldermen, to really study what the Ferguson Commission had to say about education and youth and things that we could do better to provide equity for our kids. So.
Thank you especially for putting together a list specifically identifying things that aldermen can do. I think, we talked about there are a lot of different players here, the state, and there are a lot of different levels of responsibility. The Board of Aldermen has a specific set of authority that we can participate in, but identifying things that are specific to our purview and what we can actually do is really helpful. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I would just like to add, I know that some folks had mentioned emailing the committee. I did write the email addresses for all of the committee members and their associated names, and the clerk made copies of that, and so they're over on the table if any of you would like our email addresses to communicate with us going forward.
With that, we'll take our next speaker, Ms. Joyce Roberts from the St. Louis Public School Board of Education. Dr. Roberts, I should have said, excuse me.
Good evening, everyone, members of the committee, and also members of the listening audience. I am Dr. Joyce M. Roberts. I'm here as a resident of the new mighty 26th Ward, where I'm represented by Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard. And I'm also a member of the St. Louis Public Schools Board of Education, where I serve as its secretary. My board mates have echoed my sentiments regarding collaboration, your ability to serve as advocates and liaisons for education. When education works for all children, the metropolitan region thrives. And so I'm really here to applaud your vision and the initiative taken to establish this much-needed committee. Questions?
Thank you. I'll take questions from the committee.
I'm just curious. We've heard a lot from folks, some of your colleagues as well, about their ideas in terms of how we can collaborate with one another. And I'm just wondering if you have any specific suggestions in terms of how we might collaborate with one another. Just so, as I believe my colleague from the 6th Ward, Christine Ingrassia, had mentioned, we are a new committee, as you know, so it's nice to get input, especially from members of the elected school board, where they think that we can partner with each other so that we can continue that momentum going forward. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts tonight.
Well, just as you are a new board convening this evening, we are also a very new board, and we'll have an opportunity to collaborate and come back before you with a seamless list of things that you can help us with.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. Hi. So yes, proud and excited and grateful and honored to serve and represent you down here at the Board of Aldermen. I told Shane when he announced the committee that during the campaign, one of the things you mentioned was that you wanted to set up separate education committees for each ward. And you were steadfast and faithfully down at the Board of Aldermen. I don't know if you guys remember, every Friday at the meetings, during the meetings, and that's that commitment, that level of commitment, we just don't see that, especially around our education, especially around St. Louis Public Schools. So, of course, I was impressed and just wanted to get attached to whatever you were doing, and I was excited about trying to promote those committees, but I guess that's how God works. The committee has gone to a whole nother level. It's actually a standing committee now at the Board of Aldermen, so I told Shane that when he introduced that this was going to be really good for the Board of Aldermen and for the city for us to work together in your transition process, as well as the development of this new committee. So, Dr. Roberts, thank you for all you do, all you've done, and all you do. And I want to make sure they know the position that you hold within the elected board, because that'll probably help with the correspondence of your meetings and everything like that.
Exactly. So again, thank you. I have goosebumps standing.
She's the secretary of the elected school board.
And next we have Miranda Jones from Better Family Life.
Good evening, and thank you for letting us come and talk to you today. I know you said 5 minutes, but if I do a little bit more, okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. I want to only talk for 5 minutes, let's say that. I wanted to also congratulate the St. Louis Public Schools elected board. I am not a citizen of St. Louis, though I feel like I am because I work at Better Family Life, and we are there like 90% of the time. I have pillows and blankets, so I feel like I'm definitely a member of the of this city and a resident of the 26th ward. So I did want to say I'm a neighbor in Jennings and a fellow school board member and a fellow council member from Jennings. So understanding, the connectivity of the school board and the council is so important. We've even passed legislation so that our meetings don't conflict, to make sure that we can both be at all the meetings. With our community being so small, we felt like that was so important. So we actually listed all the meetings because we were conflicting. We couldn't go to both of them. And so those are one of the things that, just thinking about some of the ways that you guys can partner is looking at those meeting dates. But I'm here really to talk about Better Family Life. And I know a lot of people have heard about Better Family Life because we've been in the community for a long time, especially with a lot of our community outreach efforts. But a lot of people don't know about how much we do in the community outside of some of just our community outreach efforts. We've been around for 36 years, and our goal is serving families, youth, and underserved people in communities. We have 5 different areas that we really work in primarily. One is workforce development. The other is cultural arts, housing and asset development, community outreach, and the department that I serve in is youth, family, and clinical services. Just to give you a couple notes about what we've done, in 2018 alone, we served 8,047 youth, and that's throughout the region. We served 35,000 hot meals. We have 638 kids that we serve in after school every day. We have 112 that we served during youth workforce last year, so that means we put 112 kids to work last year. And we've served over 6,232 kids with healthy relationship development education, with teen pregnancy prevention education, and conflict resolution education. Some of our programs include, and we have a lot of them, and really 16 funded programs. Some of them, our largest one is our teen pregnancy prevention program, which is funded through the Office of Adolescent Health. We also do sexual risk avoidance, which is the other way of saying abstinence programming. We do after school program. Again, we serve all the schools in Normandy, and then we have a program in our Better Family Life building in which we bring youth from 20 different schools to our location. We pick them up in a van and bring them to our school. We have our Kaumba Youth Performance Ensemble, which has performed all over the area, and we've also gone out of town. We've performed in D.C. and in Chicago, and they're ambassadors of the arts, and so they do different cultural activities to make sure that people understand what's going on in our community through the arts. We have our Youth Leadership Academy, which is really important. We have teen leaders, and we're actually working in partnership now with the Youth Violence Prevention Partnership. And so we've been able to do some youth cafes over last summer in which our youth were helping in writing the strategic plan for the Youth Violence Prevention partnership that we have here. We also are now leading the Youth Leadership Council on that, and we're also teaching conflict resolution through our youth violence prevention. We also have our America Scores program, which we love, and a lot of people don't realize America Scores was a standalone organization a few years ago, but now we are actually the ones that have the affiliate. So we teach soccer, poetry, and literacy, and we do it in about 7 different schools right now, and they do a competitive soccer league, and so we're really proud of the program as it's growing, as well as Volkswagen just came on, so if you're watching any of the World Cup, you'll see some ads for our America Scores program during the World Cup that's being broadcasted right now. We also have BFL Cares, which is comprehensive resource comprehensive access to resources, which we work with a lot of our clinical services. We teach Too Good for Drugs and Violence in several other schools. And I have a whole lot of other programs here, but I'm going to shorten this up. Some of the other ones would include our Education and Equity, Youth and Equity program. So we're working with a program out of DC in partnership with Deaconess Foundation to fund putting together a committee of different constituents and partners to work with youth equity and education. So that gives you kind of the full circle of some of the things that we do, and how we are serving 8,000 kids and families a year is because we do it in all these different areas. When you talk about things that we would love to see, we know that right now, when we talk about, we have to talk about crime, because so many of our kids are really struggling with trauma. Even my own kids, just in being in the neighborhood and having issues driving through the neighborhoods. And so, just making sure that we are really adequately talking about trauma and funding those programs that are really dealing with kids that have trauma. We'd also like to get to know our police officers in our community. One of the things that we've noticed is that, community policing is so important to us, so that we can start to put a face with those people that are protecting us, and that our kids feel comfortable around the police officers. Right now, they don't. They feel like they're almost enemies instead of friends, and people that are there to protect and serve. And so I really think we have to bridge that gap between our community officers, and our youth. They need to feel like that's a safe place that they can go and they can turn to. And so that's one of our things that we really want to do with our Youth Leadership Council, is to get them to really start to put a face with these officers, and for the officers to put a face with our children. Some of the other things, after school in our ward, because all of our schools, we have fewer schools now. We have a lot less opportunities for youth. And so having more programs that kids can come to, we're open every day from 2:30 to 6:30 every day. We serve them a hot meal every day. We do homework, making sure that we are working in partnership with the St. Louis Public Schools and with you all to make sure that we have adequate funding for those programs, as well as the recreational programs that we have. Our Alderwoman talked about Wohl Community Center the other day, but I encourage you all to go and look at these programs and look at the facilities and how much money and resources need to be poured into the facilities for them to be places that children feel comfortable in and can, really feel safe and thrive in those community centers. We need to put more money into those recreation centers and those green spaces. We try to use our green spaces. We walk to Ivory Prairie Park, but a lot of times we struggle with being able to play soccer there because the grass is too high or there's glass bottles. And so we do a community cleanup through our organization and through the kids, but that's something that you guys should take a look at and really see what's going on in our communities. So with that being said, I encourage you all to take a tour of our community, take a tour of Better Family Life, come and see what we do, come and meet some of our kids and see what our kids have to say and really use them as voices. They are our future. And I'm so excited about this committee, more excited than you probably realize, because I'm so jealous that you guys have done this and just really are focused, especially on today, which is a historic day. This is just a culmination of really bringing everyone together that cares about youth, and this is our future. So I can't be more excited to be here today and to talk to you all and to be a part of whatever you all have planned for the future, to be able to do better things for our kids, which are our future.
Thank you, Miranda. And with that, I'll take some questions from the committee.
Yeah, so I just, thank you, Madam Chair. I first want to address getting out and being visible in our communities. I actually recently took over the chairmanship of our Parks and Environmental Committee at the Board of Aldermen. And one of the things that I am advocating for is we are actually going to start doing tours of our city parks. It's the first time in the history of the Board of Aldermen I've been told that the Parks Committee will actually go and visit our city's parks. We have about 107 of them in the city, so I'm not sure that we'll get to every single one of them over the course of the year, but I'm working with the Parks Department to make sure that we get a great cross-section of not just our larger parks, but our neighborhood parks as well, so that the committee down here has a better understanding of the conditions and desires of our community for our park system. I'm also going to be moving our Parks Committee meetings to recreation centers throughout the city so that our Parks Committee members will have visibility to the conditions of our recreation centers and also learn more about them and where they are, right? So we all come down here representing our respective areas, but some of us have been able to, have the ability to go out and see, those resources in our cities, and others aren't. We also have a fairly new Board of Aldermen. Probably in the last 6 years that I've been down here, we've had probably about 50% turnover with new, freshly elected members. So lots of new faces down here. So I think it's a perfect opportunity to help create that visibility across the city and gain exposure and understanding of how our city is functioning right now. I did vote no on the board bill for our city budget this past Friday, partly because I don't think that we're doing an adequate job funding basic city services like forestry and parks. I don't want you to think that that is a struggle just in North St. Louis. It's certainly a struggle that we have in Southeast City as well. The Marquette Park that Thomas Dunn Learning Center is in the kind of corner of, it was probably about a foot tall grass before it got mowed last week, and other parks, in my ward, and I know Kara and Dan, who represent Southeast City wards, for the last few years in particular, I think last year I drove around and we had grass that's 4 foot tall in some cases. And so, it's unacceptable and it's not appropriate, and it doesn't do anything to raise our communities up and does not afford particularly our youth the opportunity, a safe and inviting place for them to play. So I hear you, and I want to make sure that you're aware that I, for my part, am trying to do what I can to bring resolutions to those types of concerns and issues as well. But I'm so happy to be part of this committee because I think it will amplify those concerns as well and give voice to those so that hopefully we can get even better resolve for them. So thank you.
And I definitely feel your passion and energy. So and there's probably some things that we can talk about in terms of some grant funding and other businesses that would support some of the green space development that you so desire.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions?
Hi there. I just have a quick couple of comments. Thanks so much for the work you do in the community. Even though Better Family Life's footprint does not include 6 ward neighborhoods, anytime I've needed your services and I call or text James Clark, he immediately responds. He's sent community outreach workers, or he has gone himself to intervene with people in my neighborhoods, especially folks who are under the age of probably 25, to make sure that they will not become the victims of violence or that they are not going to perpetrate on someone else. And so he's served me in Clinton Peabody, the Gate District, and Fox Park. And to the folks who were talking about Cure Violence before, Paula, I mean, Better Family Life is doing some very similar work to cure violence, and I think it's probably uniquely fit to St. Louis, and I would love to see that program expand. And so, I mean, that is critical work in our community right now, is getting people to stop using guns to solve conflicts. So thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Any other questions?
I just, of course, I'm going to have to say something because, again, as the proud alderwoman of representing Better Family Life, the 26th Ward, I just want to thank you and your team here. I hope they could be introduced as well, just so people can know and put names with faces. And as a parent of Better Family Life, my children have been serviced through Better Family Life over the years to this day. As a matter of fact, I picked up my daughter from Better Family Life on my way here. So thank you. Please continue, and I'm excited again as you are about this committee and now being able to be a resource and help you and bridge the centers, along Ms. Pauline Center, your center north and south, and bridge us together so that the work can be done equitably and collectively across serving all the youth in our city. So thank you so much to Better Family Life for being here tonight and for all the work you've done and continue to do. And if you have meetings, and I thought about it after you sat down as well, maybe just like we go to meetings in our respective wards, if you all want representation from the Youth and Education and Youth Matters Committee at your meetings, be it a board meeting or a meeting as well, I think that we can all agree that we can find one of us to come and represent.
That would be awesome, and I appreciate you. The breath of fresh air that you've brought to the 26th Ward is unmatched, so thank you so much. And I want to introduce Erica Driver, who is the Senior Director of Youth and Family Services, and Charnel Sharp, who is one of our prevention educators. So they are definitely a team, and we have some really dedicated staff and parents that make this program work. So it's definitely a village that helps the whole community. So thank you again.
Thank you. And up next, we have Tracy Miller.
Hi, I'm Tracy Miller. I am also I'm a newly elected member of the board, the St. Louis Public Schools elected board. I'm also here as a member of the 9th Ward, former classroom teacher for St. Louis Public Schools, former contractor for St. Louis Public Schools and Holyoke, Massachusetts, Boston Public Schools, Oakland. I have run youth programs at women's shelters, including at Safe Connections here in St. Louis. I've been working with after-school programs in the area, and I currently work for Khan Academy, which has the mission to provide a free world-class education to anyone, anywhere, and over 60 million users around the world. I'm saying all this, I already won the election, I don't need to get my credentials out there again. But I'm saying all this to say that I've been having these conversations about education. I'm also an education policy PhD student here at UMSL. I'm having these conversations everywhere, and this is the first time that we're having them that I know of on this level. And so I'm so thankful to this group of folks who are here. I believe this is the perfect place. I love St. Louis, and I believe there's a lot that we can do together in this city for our students. And I feel like I had something else to say, but I'm not sure what it was.
You're welcome to share it with us via email
Great.
after the meeting.
I will do that. That's all. Thank you so much
Thank you for being here.
all of
Yep,
your
and thank you for your service to the St. Louis Public Schools. Do we have any
And
questions?
I'll just quickly say congratulations on your election representing the 9th Ward in Benton Park, and hopefully we'll be able to have a lot more communications as you guys start today as your first official day of taking back control of the public school board. Be happy to work with you and figure out how we can make all this connection together. So, congrats.
I owe you an email, don't I?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
I probably owe a lot of people emails.
Okay, I'll get on that.
I do think speaking of Benton Park, the one other thing I did want to say is, I think, as you could hear tonight, who knew, nobody knew education was so complicated, right? But there's so many puzzle pieces. And I just would encourage this group to, I've had to not get overwhelmed. I wouldn't have run for the school board if I didn't think that Mr. Suggs's vision of your neighborhood school being your choice school wasn't one that we could realize together. And I think that one of the things that we want to make sure to do also is think deeply about the root causes of the inequity that's happening in our city schools. And so that's just, I guess, my parting thought to this group is there's a history there. And so while there are all of these pieces that we need to work on together, there's also a lot that's underlying that we need to work on together. Thanks.
Thank you. We have 2 speakers left, and we have a lofty goal of a 7:30 departure, but we have plenty of time to do that. With that, I'll invite up Mr. Adam Lane from the St. Louis. Well, it says here you're representing yourself. But, yeah, okay, great. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me. My name is Adam Lane. I do represent myself, but also a board member, newly elected board member for St. Louis Public Schools. When Alderwoman Hubbard told me about, Clark Hubbard, told me about this committee, we rejoiced together for many reasons. I think one of the big reason is during my campaign and during Alderwoman Clark Hubbard's campaign, we talked a lot about how education only seems important when we're talking about what's not happening, but it also only seems important when we're talking about school board elections. But all throughout the year, we're really not talking about education as much as we should, yet we say it's so important. And one of the things that I brought up was, or many people had brought up also, was we tend to look at education in isolation from the neighborhoods that they are in. So we think about the schools that they're in, we have to look at the neighborhoods that they're in too. And when you think about St. Louis, and I am not a St. Louis native, so I will acknowledge that, but for the last, well, since January, I've been working at WashU in the Academy on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and my entire job was to do research into the racial history and oppression of St. Louis, especially as it pertains to WashU and their impact. And you learn a lot and you see a lot that hasn't changed. And my plea to this committee is twofold. One, just to think very long term and also think strategically about the work that you are going to do. I know that you're probably going to get a lot of, you say Committee on Education, there are going to be a lot of requests that I know is probably outside of your wheelhouse, and that happens to us as board members all the time too. But think strategically about your role and the role that you play as alderman in St. Louis. But I also want to urge you to think about and acknowledge the fact that this is a black and white city. It has a deep history of racial oppression. Will Suggs talked about his experience going up to a school and being recommended for a magnet, and alluding to the fact, he alluded, I will say, because he's a well-spoken white man, that means that you are suited for these schools. So that type of stuff is soaked into the blood and the soil of St. Louis, and that's systemic. So that's not something that a TIF is going to solve in having someone think that because of the color of my skin, I am more suited for this school than the other. If we look at how it pertains to real estate and realty, you have realtors who will look at a Will Suggs, sorry if I keep using you as an example, but look at a Will Suggs and immediately rule out many houses in certain places. So if we want our kids to be able to sit side by side with other kids that look different from them in the classroom, we have to be willing to have people who want to be in neighborhoods living next door to people who look different from them. About the funding and about the abatements, one thing that I heard a lot during Aldergeddon was a lot of the candidates talking about how funding to develop southern South City areas is just more attractive than North City areas. If you look at the I forget the name of it right now, LRA properties list, you see a lot more on the north side than you do on the south side. Neighborhoods and neighborhood development does play a big role into the schools that we have. It plays a big role into how we fund those schools, unfortunately. But it also plays a big role in where people feel comfortable and safe sending their kids. So if we can't have strong neighborhoods, and we can look around and see which neighborhoods are stronger than others, but if we can't have strong neighborhoods in all of St. Louis, then we're not going to have strong schools in all of St. Louis. So yeah, so I will say that the six other board members, 7 if you count the superintendent, we'll be working as hard as we can, and we already have been working as hard as we can to ensure that we can be effective governors of SLPS. But we want your help in doing what you can do, especially for community development, neighborhood development, city partnerships, to make sure that that is as successful as possible. Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I would just like to thank you for your commitment as well as the rest of your St. Louis Public School elected board members. First of all, staying, hanging in there for this whole meeting, but you know it's no secret that I'm partial to you because you are a representation on that board that our little African-American black boys need to see. And I thank you for being a good representation of what they need to see. Dr. Roberts can contest that sometimes, or speak to the fact that our black boys are hard to educate at times, but they need to see, that it's important not just to you, but to our communities and to the adults in our community. And so that'll give them a leg up and inspire them to want to do better and want to be better. You were a teacher in the St. Louis Public Schools before. You didn't speak to that, so you know the challenges that we have in the St. Louis Public Schools. And I thank you, and I also thank you for always having the guts to call out the elephant in the room and know that race is important, and like you said, it's systemic in this city, and that you're ready to fight and we're ready to fight for you and for everyone in here to make sure that it's better for our children and our children's children and leading on. So thank you, Adam, for your continued service now on this yet another platform, because you've been serving, you and your beautiful fiance, wife, queen, but you guys have been in the forefront in our communities for youth and education. So thank you, and we look forward to helping you and supporting you all and the elected school board as much as we can.
Thank you. And that reminded me, I did teach at Clyde C. Miller Career Academy, and I did want to address Alderwoman Gracia's question about magnet schools being for academically gifted students. So the intent is not that, but the way that the magnet schools have progressed over time, it does tend to be that. So for example, Metro is one of the smallest high schools, and they get smaller because the freshman class that they take don't all matriculate to, or don't all graduate. They do weed out students who are lower performing and don't have the certain test scores. They're working to change that right now, but that is the kind of the standard operating procedure for a lot of the magnet schools. So you have to test in. Sometimes some of the requirements to get in there aren't as equitable as possible, and I don't mean like they're intentionally inequitable, but if I have an interview at Metro High School, but I don't have the financial means to actually get there, and we know how transportation is in the city, that can create some inequity there. So there are all that to say, yes, they have turned into schools that are for high-performing students, and even when they accept high-performing students, they still do weed out and cut off the top.
I couldn't agree more, and that was sort of what I was alluding to with respect to the struggle that I have, because my kids go to Ballencrot, but they were, designated as gifted when they were 3 years old, and they never have to take another test again to, prove that they are, and I don't even think that the curriculum is accelerated. It's not gifted. It's an accelerated program, and so I would like to have conversations to figure out how we, if we're going to have magnet schools, make them truly, serving students with a certain type of need or learning style that's important for them to be successful, and not something that's, I've seen it happen at Mallinckrodt. When we first got there, it was extremely diverse. Now we're probably less than 30%, and that's not something that makes me happy, but maybe I was a coward, and I just chose the easier path for my kids, and hopefully we can start to do something different in the future.
Absolutely. And then on the flip side of that, if you don't test into the gifted program early or get into a magnet program early, your trajectory is already severely limited, because then getting into a magnet or choice school or more choice school later is slim to none.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
And our last speaker of the evening, Marcus Robinson. Marcus, thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. Appreciate the time that you're giving to this really important issue. I've devoted my life to children. Somebody asked me yesterday had I ever worked fast food, and they were insulted when I said I did not, because I was working day camp and after school programs with kids from the time I was a junior in high school. And so I'm in my 25th year as a professional educator. I live in the 7th Ward. I grew up in the 18th Ward. If I get my way in a few weeks, I'll move back to the 18th Ward. I love this city, and have had the opportunity as an educator to be a classroom teacher in public and private settings, to be a school principal in an urban setting, to lead a system of schools, and for the last 3 years to work in educational philanthropy. Right now, I work for the Opportunity Trust, which is a new education nonprofit. We provide grants to schools and youth-serving organizations in an effort to try to promote quality school options in St. Louis and St. Louis County. A little bit about our organization. We essentially have 4 prongs that we support and provide grants in. One, practice, people, policy, parents. And so in practice, we're hoping to find the most effective public education programs that are working for kids in the city, and to grow those programs and to provide them the seed money to serve more kids. We focus on people, How do we improve the talent equation here in St. Louis? Grants to groups like Teach for America, the St. Louis Teacher Residency. We're thinking about ways to do leadership pipelines for our urban schools. Had superintendents reflect just last week. We need greater pipelines for the principal's office, and that's a problem that we hope to solve. We also sponsor an educational entrepreneur in residence, where we give an individual in this community funding for 2 years to develop an innovative school model for St. Louis. So we're working on people. We also talk about policy. How do we take the most obstructive policies that get in the way of public educators trying to do their job and move those out of the way, so these great people have a clearer pathway to be able to serve our kids. And finally, this whole question of parents. I've been involved in the school reform movement for almost 20 years, and I think the thing that school reform got wrong nationally is this whole question of supply versus demand. And so I think philanthropists across the country did what they thought was a good job of proliferating school options without really connecting with communities and neighborhoods around what the best options needed to be. What is the demand? And so we're investing in groups that are helping parents be educated and informed about school options, and also advocate for what they think is best for their kids. So in a nutshell, that's what the Opportunity Trust is and what it does. And I love to talk to you more offline about our work and how that might intersect with the work of the Board of Aldermen. I want to echo your excitement around the elected school board and their leadership. It's rare that you find a group of elected officials with this much educational experience, former teachers, former school principals, and district leaders. That's a unique perspective for a city school board to be able to bring to bear on behalf of the citizens in this community. So I'm excited about that. You posed an interesting question around this group and its charge and where it could be most useful. And I will just say, not as a representative of the philanthropic community, but just really as a citizen in this community, I think there has to be a conversation at some point about what school quality is all about. We talk a lot about the transformation of our neighborhoods and the things that plague them. And some of the problems seem almost intractable when we start to talk about things like youth violence, for instance. But I heard a priest by the name of Greg Doyle in LA, who runs a group called Homeboy Industries, say that youth violence is not about guns, it's about the ruthless absence of hope. So the question before us as a community ultimately is, what kinds of structures, that's translated schools, but it's also community centers, it's great parks. What kind of structures are necessary to give hope to our kids and to their families, so that we don't have the kind of flight we have when young families decide that they need to move from our neighborhoods into something that they think is better? How do we create hope? And so there's a quality question to be had as a community. I think our problems can be solved once we set a bar for what we think quality, hope-building, youth-serving structures look like. Because then that helps this Board of Education understand the kind of schools that we ought to be thinking about. We don't just need better schools, as my partner Eric Scroggins says in this work at the Opportunity Trust, we need different schools. And not just schools with different curriculum, not just schools with different wraparound services. We may need schools that don't close at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We may need schools that don't have a summer break. We may need schools that, in addition to doing schooling, we provide access to a bevy of growth experiences that kids need to be healthy and whole. And so I believe with all my heart that conversation is not just about these fine people who are running a significant school district. It's not just about us out hunting for resources for this community, but it's also about you and how you represent the neighborhoods in this city to help us understand where our greatest priority is. You set the finish line We're always going to want to improve. But whether quality looks like 50% proficiency in our city or 80% proficiency in our city or 100% proficiency in our city, that's a conversation that the whole city needs to have, and you are our representatives in that regard. So I look forward to working with you, and again, if it benefits you, I'd love to talk to you offline about our other work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. And with that, I think we will conclude. This is our last speaker of the evening. Did anybody have any questions for Mr. Robinson? We can
talk offline.
We can talk offline. I want to commend the school board and congratulate you all on your first full day of service. Thank you for bringing your perspective here. Dr. Adams, of course, the superintendent, was here earlier in support of our elected school board. I want to make sure that we acknowledge his presence here tonight. Thank you to everyone here who spent their Monday evening here sharing and listening. I think we heard a lot of different perspectives, most notably a really a holistic approach to education. We heard a lot about not only our schools, but the wraparound service after-school programs, the need for us as a committee to look at violence within our youth population, those green spaces, getting from place to place, from home to school, being able to cross the street without fear of cars, gun violence, and other things that are impacting our youth, trauma, policing, community policing, and other barriers to quality education. I think I was a little personally surprised to hear so much about things outside of the educational system, but really reminded, I think, all of us how important a holistic approach to schools and education and really everything that impacts city residents really is. So thank you for reminding us all of that. I think what we'll do moving forward is have an email chain, an email list that we can have the general public, anybody sign up for, to make sure that you're aware of meetings that we're going to have, items that we'll cover, topics that we will cover. And I ask you all to remember that the Board of Aldermen is a policy legislative body. So if you do have issues or proposals or concerns specifically that we can address through policy changes, please make sure to bring those to our attention so that we can start to really kind of go through some issues that that we have responsibility for addressing.
Sorry, when you have a second, I have a comment. If it's
sure, go ahead.
Possible.
Go ahead.
So I just wanted to, I'm very happy that we're having all of these conversations on the record. I think that's one of the main uses of this committee, is to have these conversations out in public. And so it just struck me with our last speaker. I know that there are a lot of conversations that are currently happening offline, and I think the whole point of this is to have these conversations online, out in public, out in front, so that we can see what all is going on and what we can be working on together. So as we go forward, I think we are all very interested and would love to have conversations with all of you, in person, especially if you're constituents and have particular interests in our wards. But the more we can have these out in public, the more public hearings like this we can get into. We can really be direct and out in the light as far as what we're working on here for our kids. So thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman Rice. And again, and to spin off that even further, not only do we have the public record, but we also have the ability to convene different groups of people together in a setting that allows for some public discourse in a public manner. So this really can be a forum for some very constructive dialogue, and look forward to moving that ahead. Was remiss in not recognizing our clerk, former Alderman Mr. Terry Kennedy, for providing all of the materials and the agenda. This is new to the Board of Aldermen and much appreciated in keeping us on track and organized. Thank you very much for organizing all that tonight. And with that, I'll take a motion to...
I move that we adjourn the Youth and Education, Education and Youth Matters Committee for our first meeting, and date for our next committee meeting to be determined.
That's right. Second? Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No, let's keep going.